What's up, everybody? Today I'm going to be talking to you about another abstract life lesson, and it's going to be about your rights, your freedoms, your location, okay? Because these things completely determine one another. And in some ways, by being where you are, you have given up certain rights in exchange for other rights. But this isn't a decision that you made at some point. It was a decision that was made for you that you can remake at any point that you desire, right? And often this is a decision that's made for us by our parents. And even our parents might not have purposefully made this decision, okay? And it's really important to understand that, like, your location completely determines the kind of experience that you have when you come into the world. Your beliefs are gonna be hugely affected by where you're raised. The environments that you're in are going to completely kind of dictate who you are and the way that you think, right? And ultimately, if you have been in one environment for most of your exposure, your time as a human, you do not have an accurate sense of what most humans experience. So your understanding of how to get results out of life and how to get results out of other people is based off of a very small portion of humanity. This causes a lot of problems, right? And I'm talking about this because it's important to understand how where you came from affects who you are now and who you want to be. And it's also important to make sure that the rights that you care about match the rights that you get for where you live, okay? Like, I personally, if I'm around good friends, I'm happier in a country like Nicaragua or somewhere else. But that's only the case because I started out in the US and I have a US identity and I'm able to earn in US dollars even if my physical body is in a foreign country, right? So that doesn't mean that Nicaragua is better in that sense. I'm happier there because of my time in the States and because of what that allowed me to do. Whereas if I was just in Nicaragua, I would have had much less access to the information that I needed to experience all the things that I needed to experience to get to the point that I understand that you can earn money in any way that you want online. It's not a matter of if you can do it, right? It's a matter of how do you want to do it? What makes you happy? What's a realistic way for you to change your life and earn money doing what you love based on who you are as a person? And it's kind of hard to talk about this subject in particular. Moving around a lot, sorry. Just because how do you communicate to a person who hasn't traveled? How do you explain how them being raised in one location holds them back? Like, at the same time, how do you give somebody the courage to even be willing to throw themselves into a new environment? Because that's the kind of thing, like, a lot of people understand that traveling is really important and that it's really beneficial for a lot of different reasons, right? But not many people are willing to throw themselves out there, or they don't necessarily know how to do that, right? Traveling is something that you do when you have money or you're on vacation or you work for a long time, so you travel when you're older, right? Really, you should travel at the beginning because it has such a huge change on your life. But how can I help you guys? Maybe there's some of you out there who just want to be in a better place, but you don't know how to. You don't know how to make that happen. So I guess before I can better understand what I can do in that sense, I should share what happened with me, right? Because I was raised traveling, so that makes it more approachable, but that's not super relevant at the moment. because I'm specifically referring to when I was still a barista at Starbucks. I got an opportunity to participate in Grind Camp and go to Nicaragua, right? At this point in my life, I was earning enough money online that I could live in a foreign country and not have a day job. And I had been aware of that for roughly 5 or 6 months, right? And really, once you get to that point, like, I should have just, there's nothing that was actually stopping me from, once I realized that, from just going to another country specifically so that I could, you know, just work on business stuff and have all day to increase my income, right? I knew that logically, but there was no way I was just gonna throw myself into a foreign country. Like, no way was I gonna do that, you know? Even though I knew that that was a huge life-changing event that would guarantee that I get exposed to the lifestyle and the information necessary to live the life that makes me happy, right? And ultimately, I got lucky because of Grind Camp, because of knowing about that event. That was just a thing to get me into the country. And I didn't realize that at the time. Like, I thought Grind Camp was everything. But now I understand that it was the thing, the event that enabled me to be in a foreign country and see firsthand that I don't just think that it's possible that you can go live in a foreign country much cheaper. It literally is, and know that, because there's a difference between knowing something, logically being told it, understanding it, versus actually truly comprehending it and taking it as a law of your life, right? As a rule, as set in stone as gravity. I don't have any doubt about gravity. I don't think maybe it's possible that gravity will apply. Like, it definitely applies, right? And that's how I feel about earning money online now. It absolutely is doable. Absolutely. It's just a matter of how you want to do it. And the reason that it doesn't seem doable to most people is because it's so fucking new. Like, almost everything in our lives, guys, has been around for at least hundreds of years. Most things, like plumbing, having a roof over your head, the systems you use to cook food, that kind of thing. These are all long, like, ingrained concepts, right? People have been waiters for a long time. People have been pilots for a long time. People have been captains of ships. People have been mining. People have been farming for ages. Some of those things, thousands of years. It's given us a lot of time to access that information, right? Whereas internet stuff is all new. It's within generations, which is so little time. So little time. And that's the great irony, is that literally, if you're watching this video, that means that you have internet access, which means that you can completely change the quality of your life if you actually want to. It's not a matter of like, oh, maybe that's possible. Maybe it's gonna, it is a reality of the world that we live in. And I'm saying this over and over again because I want you to understand that. It's so frustrating to me when people stop pursuing an interest because they're not sure if it's gonna work or not. It's like, it's not how it works. And that's not how you get to the point where you're perceived as successful by other people, right? That just happens once you've just continued over and over and over again. And you understand that what you want is completely doable. It's just a matter of recognizing that you don't necessarily know how to make what you want happen. It's okay, that's completely fine. You don't have to know. But what you do have to do is you do have to believe it's possible. That is huge. You absolutely have to believe it's possible, okay? And like, that's why I consider this video kind of ironic. Because I want to talk to you guys about the fact that if you're struggling, or almost all scenarios, wow, really, all over the place, sorry there. Almost all scenarios faced by anybody in the world, you can overcome that scenario and be in a new situation within a year if you are willing to give up most of the things that you have. If you are willing to go away from your family, to go away from your friends, not forever, obviously, but for a period of time, if you're willing to do that, you can completely change the quality of your life in a year or less. Absolutely. But the rest of me knows, like, okay, yeah, that's true, and that's an opportunity that's available to literally everybody in the world who has an internet connection. The unfortunate thing about life is that our circumstances aren't what hold us back. Our circumstances are what shape us into the person that we are, but they're not what hold us back. What holds us back is what's in our head. All of us, all people. The biggest barrier to what you want is yourself. Almost always. So, is that Chesley? I don't know who that is. The biggest barrier that you're going to face is always yourself and your preconceptions about how the world works. Because the reality is that very few, if anybody, comes into this earth, whether you're from Morocco or the States or Egypt or Nicaragua, no matter where you're from, nobody comes into this earth and is educated about how the modern world works and accurately shown what opportunity looks like in the modern day and age. We are taught to live in a world that existed when the people who taught us existed. It's a different world. It has been changed in so many fundamental ways. Huge frameworks involving the internet and communication mostly that just completely changed everything, right? And to elaborate a little bit more on this kind of barrier I'm talking about, I want to explain an interaction I had to you guys with one of my family members. And so this is a very, very accomplished individual, was high up in the World Bank. He was involved with people who, he got to interact with new cultures and help them establish banking and get involved and grow as nations, right? That's huge and amazing and such an awesome position to be in, right? That being said, there was a point where I was trying to communicate with him why I was going to Nicaragua. Because from his perspective, I'm being like my father, and I'm not thinking about my future, right? Because when my father traveled, he did pretty much the same thing that I've done when I went to Nicaragua. He went to other places where the cost of living is much less overseas and lived in that lifestyle, knowing that you can live better. Your quality of life is much better than if you're in the States earning less money, right? The problem is that when my dad was around, this was 30 or 40 years ago. We live in a different world. I have so much access to opportunity and information through technology that he just did not have access to, right? So from his cousin's perspective, the one who we're talking about in this scenario, yeah, my father exposed himself to a lot of things. That's good. But at the same time, because my father spent so much time traveling and having jobs overseas, he didn't have a pension. He didn't have insurance. When my father died, there was no life insurance. He didn't even have proper health insurance. So my mother went $100,000 into debt and had to deal with a dead spouse. That's insane, you know? And I love my father, but at the same time, there are obviously decisions that could have been made to very much alleviate all of that, you know? But, that doesn't matter. My point is that it was a different time back then. And to this older individual, in my head, I was like, okay, I just have to explain to him that I'm doing YouTube work, because that's really the reason that my life is, like, I consider myself in a good place. It's like, yeah, I don't have a college degree and that kind of thing, but I have a YouTube channel. People know who I am, and I'm really, really fucking happy. Like, I don't relate to a lot of the recurring theme that, like, being alive is frustrating, and it's a battle, and it's a war, and that ultimately everyone's depressed, and that people kill themselves. Like, there's no part of me that relates to that, because I understand that because I saw death, and I understand that you have to be joyful. It's the whole fucking point, is to be joyful and be around people. That makes me very different, right? It gives me kind of a power, if that makes sense. And I was hoping that I could just help show him that by talking to him about YouTube. Because in my head, I can show this person who I look up to that, like, hey, it's kind of like it's like what is a resume for you, except for me, like, anywhere in the world people can get to know me and invite me to stuff, and that brings a lot of opportunity into my life and is completely life-changing, right? But then he didn't know what YouTube was. And I was shocked, and I didn't know how I could possibly explain to somebody who doesn't know what YouTube is. Like, and it was such an interesting moment, because the second I realized that he didn't know what YouTube is, that means that he doesn't understand why the videos matter. He doesn't understand the audience. He doesn't know the global reach. There were just all of these things that just clicked into my head. And I was completely lost for words. I had no idea how I could possibly explain that while my father's traveling was detrimental to his future in a lot of ways, I travel because of my future, and because of going through that and understanding that, like, and wanting the best possible life in the long run. That's why I live the way that I do. I very much think about my future. If I didn't think too much about my future, I would have just stayed in school. I was in school. I could have just stayed on that path, you know, like, very much. But I knew that if you live your life for other people, you end up perceived as successful, but then you kill yourself or something. Like, if you go down the path that everyone makes you think is the right way to get everyone's approval, you screw yourself, because you generalize your life so far away from who you are that it's impossible for you to live your life and actually be happy. And most people live that way. So there is no way that I want to be involved in that. Like, none, right? And my point here, I know that this is a very long video. I'm trying to make each of these 20 minutes because, again, they're going to be like the rough draft of chapters for a short ebook, right? I really want you guys to understand how much your location affects the condition of your life. And I think the best way for you to experience this, really, for you to understand it the best that you can, is, honestly, you just got to try and go to a different country for, honestly, no reason. Find an excuse. Find somebody who's going to somewhere that you can access that's cheap, and go there. And, like, ideally, you want to go somewhere for a month, if possible. The problem with being touristy is that, like, it's tricky. I'm trying so hard to think of what I can share with you guys to really, really emphasize how much you've traded, how many rights you've traded to be in the location that you're in. Because almost certainly it's worse to stay where you have been. Almost always that's the case. Whether you're in a more impoverished nation or you're in a more wealthy nation, either way, you benefit from spending time in the other scenarios. So ultimately, you have to expose yourself to the other lifestyles so that you can understand what rights, what basic fundamental human rights you have been trading, what experiences you've been trading, right? And so just to give some examples of this, now that I've really blabbered on and any of you following really get the concept, like, it's pretty basic stuff. Like, in the States, for example, there is a huge emphasis on, like, me. It's all about you and your belongings and your accomplishments, the things that you own, if you have a wife or a husband, the things that you possess. There is this huge emphasis on individuality and the possession of stuff, right? And this is actually really harmful, because the reality is the only reason it's cool to be an amazing, talented person is because you get to be around a bunch of other cool, amazing, really talented people, and life's really fun because of that. It's fun because of the people that you're around. It's always about people, okay? Always. And that's what I'm kind of getting at here, is that, like, yeah, in the States, you have access to so much physical stuff, right? You have easy access to information and easy access to technology. But the problem is that because you are often raised this way, you lack a huge fundamental understanding of what life is like for most people and why you should be so happy and appreciative, right? And in order to actually appreciate the things that you have access to, in order to even start to fathom what it means to say that you have access to more things, you have to expose yourself to situations where you don't have as much access, right? And then also kind of goes true for overseas people, except in the opposite way. You are much more likely to have an appreciation for life and for things, because you have less usually. You have less access to physical things. However, it's much more likely that you have been raised into this world with a closer connection with other people. That's just kind of something that I've always known, and my parents have always told me about being overseas versus being in the United States, is that, like, overseas, in a lot of places, people can just, like, come to your house and come inside and have tea, and your front door may even be, like, open. And, like, that's your neighbor, but you have a good connection with them. As long as there's relative safety, it's really common to have those kind of experiences. So many things are shared. You don't go through a day alone normally. You normally are around a lot of people, right? And I'm not saying that this is the case for all people. You can definitely be lonely overseas. But in general, non-US cultures place much more of an emphasis on this feeling of a community, of family, and that kind of thing. Whereas people in the United States are more focused on their individuality. And ultimately, it's my belief that the only way, it's just way more efficient to be part of a community. You're literally, like, people put you in an emotional state. It's like being drugged. And the kinds of people you're around determine what kind of experience that is, right? So you can't not be better off being around a bunch of people who understand your goals in life and are actively trying to forward them. And you are like that with them as well. Like, this appreciation of other people, kind of what it boils down to is your worldview. And whether you feel that it's your job or your responsibility to care about other people or not. Because what a lot of people here, or a lot of more selfish people in the world, what they think is that it's not their problem to help other people. They got to the point they did alone, so other people can do that too. They can do the hard work. That's like how a lot of people view the world, But ultimately, if you view the world that way, you're not helping anyone you're around, you're not improving their lives, you're going to be lonely, you're going to go through more emotions, you're going to be more likely to give up or kill yourself or become depressive, make reckless decisions, have drug problems. All these kind of things just become more likely because of your lack of fundamental understanding that humans are social creatures and we actively need to be around a lot of people that we relate to and feel like part of a community with, right? And this is the biggest distinction when I'm talking about your kind of rights and your perception. When these trades that you've made by being in the location that you are, that's the most general way to explain that, is that if you're in a developed nation, and I say the United States, but I'm talking about places like Japan, certain countries in Europe as well. Pretty much, you're more likely to have access to physical things and information, right? Whereas people in other countries are more likely to have a better understanding of people, but they have less access to information. So by mingling, by other countries coming and getting access to that information, they spread the thing that the developed nations are weak in, and vice versa, right? The kind of problem is that it's hard for the people in developing areas to travel because travel is expensive, right? But that's because of how people perceive traveling, which is my whole point. You can, when you talk about traveling, you're probably thinking that you have to pay for plane rides, that kind of thing. And you think of it like vacations, because that's how most people perceive traveling. But that doesn't have to be how it is. Like, you can be somebody who's on Instagram, and traveling is not an expense to you. You literally just make Instagram posts, and then you message people who own hostels and hotels and places to stay, bed and breakfasts, and you ask if you do posts, if they'll let you stay there for free. You live a completely different lifestyle, right? And that's the point, is that ultimately you have to understand that there's a way to make whatever lifestyle you want, whatever you're thinking about. Like, if you ask yourself, what life do I want? What life would make me the most happiest? There's not only a way to do that, but there's a way to do that and to be paid for it, okay? If you want to get to the point where you're paid for it, you have to just do it, and do it for free for a while. And that is going to educate you. It's going to tell you exactly what you need to do to be able to do what you love and earn a living from it. And the biggest catalyst that you can do on your life to get to this point is to change your geographical location. That's all you have to do. Visit other countries. Find a place that you can go in any way, whether it's like buying a ticket and going there for 2 weeks, or it's like joining a volunteer thing and you have to be working in order to go there, but you get to do it for free. Like, there are so many ways you can travel. It's just a matter of making that happen in like a more out-of-the-box, controversial way. If you're listening to this and you're having trouble conceptualizing that, well, just talk about it. That's the first thing you got to do. You got to be talking about the fact that you want to go to different countries. Bring it up routinely over the next couple weeks in your life. When people ask how your day's been, be like, it's been good. I've been thinking about going traveling today. Or not thinking about it, but like, share what's going on in your head related to traveling in some way. That's step one, okay? You don't have to figure out exactly how you're going to do it yet. You just have to make sure that the world knows that that's what you want, because then opportunities will be communicated to you. But if you're not sharing all of these things, if you're not talking about this, well, that's never going to happen, is it? All right, guys, thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time. Ciao.